Good evening. I'd like to call the East Greenbush Central School District Board of Education meeting for August 5th, 2026 to order. We are all present except William and Elliot are not here tonight. Can we rise for the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, first up, approval of the draft minutes for the organizational meeting from July 5th. Any comments or questions on that one? Motion to approve. Kathy, second. Sam, all those in favor? Approval of the draft minutes for the regular meeting from July 15th. Comments or questions on that one? Okay, motion to approve. RP, second. Sam, all those in favor? Okay, public forum. Residents, students, employees, and business representatives of the East Greenbush Central School District may address the board on matters concerning programs and or operations of the district other than matters involving personnel. Members of the board do not directly respond to citizen concerns during the public forum. If a response is appropriate, either the president or superintendent will contact the individual in the near future. Those persons wishing to address the board will be recognized by the chair of the meeting and should state for the record their name and address or affiliation with the district or business. While the board does not wish to infringe upon free speech protections, it must be stressed that the visitors' forum is not deemed to be an open forum. The board president will conduct the forum for the orderly and efficient operation of board business. In addition, any remarks which may be considered defamatory or stigmatizing are prohibited and will be declared out of order. All comments shall be limited to 5 minutes. And we have, okay. Moving on to the board forum, starting over with Rob.
More said, thanks. That's it.
I just wanted to mention, I was thinking Mark Adams sent out the digest and the Curriculum Central is going to be a really neat platform. And I appreciate that the board is included in that. I don't know whose idea that was, but it gives us a good view of what's going on. It's hard for us to keep track of all the different initiatives, and especially regarding curriculum that we're not familiar with. So very nice to see that. And the event, to me, I went to Green Meadow for Mr. O'Malley's Meet the Principal night. Very well attended, lovely opportunity for families to get to know the principal. So I appreciate that opportunity.
Likewise, I attended the Green Meadow meetup. So super thanks to all the faculty, staff, administrators who were a part of that. And it was a great chance to meet Mr. O'Malley. I mean, I'd met him before, but it was great for all the families to meet him and to get together with each other, and for the kids to just have a great time on the playground.
The incoming kindergartners are still talking about the size of the ice pops. I would just put it out there. A couple of weeks ago, unfortunately, Rob wasn't able to join, but I went over for a second visit to the transportation department. And I just really want to say how great things are going at transportation. This space looks completely different. It's transformed. Craig has done a really great job just like cleaning it up. The mechanics are now working in a really great atmosphere. So things are really kind of going in the right direction. I think it would be great for all of us to try to maybe have a board meeting at there at some point, or go with like a back to school event. So I think it would mean a lot for for them and for all of you to see the really great progress.
Moving along to reports and presentations, administrative and committee reports.
Great. Thank you very much. So just to follow up on what Ms. Phillips had brought up, the drivers have typically in the past had hours over the summer to help repaint the bus lanes, and Mrs. Mulligan has been very generous with allowing them to take some ownership of the facility itself. And not only have they been cleaning and getting rid of things that have just been sitting, they've been painting. I was just over the other day to address a matter. They've painted the whole break room. They scraped down door frames. They've really taken ownership of where they work. And if we wanted to consider scheduling a meeting, I think they would be really happy to host that and be honored to have that be part of the repertoire for the board for the year. The other thing that I did want to just review as a matter of just conversation with the board. I know there had been a question regarding committee assignments for the new year. So I did share with the board in the last weekly email that went out a copy of a tentative schedule for committee meetings for this year. I'm open to work together on how we want to select who takes ownership or volunteers for whatever committees that we want. But what Stephanie did do is go through the regular log that we use just to assign people to the committees. She took all the board member names out of there. And again, happy to work together with the board on how you want to choose how that happens. We can make amendments to dates. We can talk about meeting times, whatever the case may be. Obviously, we do have some constraints when it comes to having staff members be able to attend, but open to thoughts and ideas from the board.
Anybody have?
Could we maybe create a Google Doc and have people go in and sign up for the committees they're interested in, and then we can see if there's an issue, if we don't have committees that are staffed or have too many people on, then we can talk amongst ourselves and just.
Is the
Figure
board
that out.
comfortable if we just create even a copy of this
Yeah.
and share it out and just allow people to fill in where they're interested?
Absolutely.
Obviously the only break point is if you break a quorum,
Yeah.
obviously you have to
We'll have to.
reconsider who's going to be assigned to what committee. But again, I'm open to conversation on if things are difficult for times. Could we meet in the morning? Could we meet a little bit? I'm more than happy to talk with the committee members that are usually on there. If somebody really feels that they want to be involved in something, there's always more than one way to reconsider how we can do things better, do it virtually, whatever the case may be. But I'll go ahead, I'll make a copy of this. We'll send it out. I'll work together with Jeannie on that. And that will give us a good platform to get started for the year.
So it's only, so on these committees, just from an experience standpoint, on each one of these committees, we can have up to 4. Forget the, I didn't know if it would be too many, like.
Not all, there's a couple committees that are contractual, special grants, I think is just one board member. So there's, some can go up to 4, so we don't hit quorum. Others, it's a specified amount.
Is that
below
on,
4.
is that gonna be
Can,
noted?
could we include that? I think that's a great,
Sure.
That was the only question, like,
Yeah.
what if,
Yeah.
what if I
Yeah.
wanna take one
If
that
there's a
Rob's on,
limit.
are we gonna have to duke it out? How does that work?
Yep.
He's working out though, so.
I will absolutely include that in the email that goes out.
Dr. Coates, also, if there's a committee that we should attend in our, like, I had the conversation briefly, like, about being the deputy clerk, like, if there's
Mhm.
a recommendation from your team, that would be helpful too.
So when we get that document, should we all just sign up for what we like, regardless of whether we've gone over a quorum? Because the issue we ran into is we've had the Google Doc in the past, but then it just becomes first come, first serve. So maybe everybody just sign up and then we can discuss it if we have too many.
I think
I would
that's
say
right.
everybody
Okay, yeah.
sign up, and if we have an
Okay.
issue,
Yep.
then we can talk
Yeah, then
about
we can-
how to deal with the issue.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
it might not happen.
Right.
Mhm.
Okay, good.
And it can be nice to, when we can have more than one person on it, to do that. Cindy and I were on the CCS committee. Occasionally, one of us couldn't make a meeting, but we were able to work it that I think one of us was always there. So that is nice too, to make sure there's always board representation at a meeting.
You mean you have lives outside the meeting?
Sometimes.
Is there a reason why some are blue and some are red?
There's no rhyme or reason to the color scheme.
Okay. I didn't know whether it meant it was new. Some of these committees don't look familiar. to me.
And was that from last year when maybe we consolidated some committees?
It may have been, but there's no connection to this year. Other thoughts on that? All right, I'll make sure this goes out then this week. So I would like to invite up Mr. Jones and Mrs. Harris. One of the first presentations tonight that we will be going over is something that they have been doing some research on in terms of ability of the district in a very modest way to be able to expand our offerings for all of our students, including our students with disabilities. And they approached me midsummer after doing a lot of research on this for the potential of a unified bocce program. And I brought something very, what I consider very cost neutral to me as a proposal that I would support the board considering. And I'm going to allow them to take over with the presentation they have prepared for you tonight.
Yeah, great.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to present tonight about bocce. I think of all the things that we present about, this is kind of a fun one. So first, thank you. We're really excited to talk about the idea of expanding Special Olympics, unified sports offerings at Columbia. And you have been great advocates and partners for us to already offer basketball and bowling. So thank you. So we're going to just talk a little bit about what unified sports are and what we see as participation in the district, as well as just a little bit about bocce if you don't know, as well as some considerations for the board. So we've seen overall just some really great offerings through Special Olympics. They've been great partners to us over the year, and we're really excited. We offer unified bowling and unified basketball. If you haven't been to a match or a game, it is, I think, the most heartwarming thing to see our students with disabilities partnering with our students without disabilities to really participate fully in a sport. They practice, they work on skill development, they work on social skills, and it is, without a doubt, if you go, you have a cute story, you see some smiling faces, and it's a great time. We've seen a real increase in participation over the years. So bowling consistently gets between 25 to 26 players during the bowling season. And then basketball, we've seen a real increase from 25 to 40 players over the years. So we're really seeing our students participate, which led us to wonder, are there other offerings that we would consider? Which is how we got to bocce.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, bowling, basketball have been great opportunities for our students. Section 2, I think, brought along bocce. I think we're going to maybe year 3 or 4 across Section 2. And it's kind of, something to put in a third season for our students that are looking to go along this path. So this would kind of be the fall placement sport. Bocce, it's a long game. There's different, ways to play it. Some schools, they have their own courts set up at, a community center. There's different setups, as you can see here. The sport can also just be played on a grass field. How it works, and we spoke with the representatives from Special Olympics in late September. You kind of get things going. You have your signups, get your teams together, and you just start practicing with your team. And then early to mid-October is when you kind of get into your league play. Currently, right now, there are 36 other schools in Section 2 that are participating in unified bocce. Right here is the classification we would be put in with April Park, Berlin, Hoosick Falls. That would be our grouping for the league portion. And then there are 5 other divisions that once we get to the late October culminating event, they look at everyone across all of the 6 divisions, and they kind of place you with like results throughout the year, so you can have a nice competitive end of the year event. For basketball, we've been doing it. They've been having the opportunity to play basketballs, calling events at MVP Arena the last 2 years. So that's been a very exciting thing for the kids. And the first year I went to it at MVP Arena, and there's not a ton of people in the stands. It's this big stadium, and I went to Coach DeBacco after. I'm like, did the kids like this? They're like, they loved it. It may not be a packed stadium, but they're like the locker room, being on the court, all this stuff, and announcer, they loved it. So, again, another sport like this, I know Unified and Special Olympics is always making up ways that it's an exciting event for our students. So I'm sure, with bocce, along with what they do for bowling and basketball, they're going to continue to grow these sports. And then just kind of what the gameplay looks like. Courts, 12 by 60 feet. And there's different options, as I mentioned. There's PVC piping. There's these nylon strips that you can order. I spoke to some of the other schools in our league, and I was like, what do you absolutely need? And they said, Special Olympics gave out some of these startup kits to begin with, and they were like these nylon ribbons, or like the kids didn't even like them. We've been painting lines, on a grass field. That's pretty much what you need, along with the bocce sets, the gear in there, the 4 balls and the polina. You would need 3 sets of that. We were kind of looking at prices recently that you could probably get a set for about $100. So, 4 or 5 sets, a couple $100 for that. For the time being, we could paint our own lines and fields and things like that. You would need 3 courts set up, because that brings us into our rosters. You play 4 on a court, so it's 4v4. So there's 12 playing at a time. And I talked with some of the schools, and 12 is kind of your minimum what you would need on your team, but you play 3 rounds on each court, and you can sub players in at those courts and things like that. So 12 is the minimum, but you can kind of go as high as you want. And you talk to teams ahead of time and they have 16, and we have enough courts, we could add other courts, so you can get more participation that way. But, again, Special Olympics, they kind of keep track of everything. They keep track of the results and things like that, so that they can put together these calling events. And it's a really, really nice event that they run along with the other options.
So really, in terms of equipment needed, would be the sets of balls, and then we were thinking uniforms. We could use shirts that Columbia already has, and then our thought in terms of the coaching stipend would be to provide that in the same way that we provide unified bowling and basketball stipends right through our grant money. So pretty minimal in terms of a startup for a sport.
And Ms. Harris, sorry,
Yeah.
just for clarification
Yeah,
on the
sure.
grant money. So that 611, 619 grant money, that is federal money that we typically receive. And historically, we have not spent all of that money, so we have carryover every year, which is why we're proposing potentially that it comes from that carryover money. And again, it's minimal, the cost that we're looking at.
Yeah, and we could also look into, I have uniform money for sports each year, and we could look into, how much uniforms might cost, so they can have their own specific uniform.
Do we have bowling shirts for bowling?
Bowling does, yeah.
Yes.
So,
That's more curiosity.
yeah, I mean, they're more of just like a dry fit shirt.
Oh, all right, yeah,
By
yeah.
bowling, so I'm sure we could look into something that's similar for that.
Where are you
Basketball
thinking
is-
of playing?
Looking at some of the grass fields at Columbia, over towards, the soccer baseball area, or also maybe some of the front area above the softball field.
So you could never, look, I'm just thinking, like, full disclosure, I used to play bocce a lot, but make a court pretty, you can make an actual court relatively easily. But I think the problem would be is the maintenance of it, right? So it would be hard if we had, I mean, we'd have like 10 people donate time. It's like, it's not a lot of wood, right?
Yeah.
But it's probably better to just play on grass than in an actual court, at least for the first couple of years.
Yeah, I think to start out, the main school I spoke with was Burnt Hills. They have a lot of grass space out there, and they said they started with these nylon things, and they're like, we just paint lines. Kids loved it. You can put it as many fields as you need it, many courts as you need it. But then some of the schools have done a few years, like Niskayuna, they built some courts and things like that. So I think if we get it going and things like that down the road, we may have the opportunity to. Could be a school project.
Yeah.
Maybe build some courts or things like that. So.
And you said it's minimum 12, but this would be something where we wouldn't have to turn people away. Theoretically, we
No.
could keep. Okay.
Yes, we can go as high as we need to,
Great.
Just like all the other sports. Even basketball, you only have 5 on a court, but we have up to 40
Right.
on the team. And,
Okay.
they all get an opportunity and things like that.
Great.
That was gonna be one of my questions is what, like, I'm wondering, like, thinking about this as a unified sport programming, like what gives it that lens particularly? Like, I'm just saying, like, when we think about, sport.
Yeah, kind of the purpose of unified sports. Yeah, so I think it's really nice. It's a partnership between what they consider to be the athletes, who are the students with intellectual disabilities, and what they call the partners, who are the students without disabilities. And so we've had a pretty consistent, from my understanding, consistent student group of students with disabilities who want to participate, but have seen a real increase in students without disabilities wanting to be partners, which has been really special. I think Ryan's team's done an incredible job too of also considering to brainstorm that to bring it into unified physical education. So it's just a really nice inclusive culture. Of course, it's the sport, so they're doing skill development, but even over the course of the basketball games, they'll do 3 traditional quarters, and then they'll do a more modified quarter. That's a slower pace. So everyone really gets a chance to be involved. So that's the unified part of it.
Awesome.
Yeah.
And Special Olympics kind of dictates, what the numbers have to look like, how many players, how many partners are participating. So bocce is 2 and 2. Basketball, they have the same thing in place. How many players on the court at a time can be a partner versus a player, things like that.
And if I wasn't mistaken from our conversation, the genesis of this really came from our families. Our families
Yeah.
were looking for another opportunity through the season, and your investigation revealed this really was a good possibility for us.
Yeah, at the conclusion of the basketball season, there was an end of year banquet, and a special Olympics representative always comes. And the question sort of from all the families was, okay, what can we do next? We've loved bowling, we've loved basketball. And so bocce is the next option.
And would
So
this give us a sport each season for unified?
it would.
Yeah, so this would be the fall sport. Bowling is our winter sport.
Okay.
And then basketball, they kind of do it early spring.
Okay.
So that
Great.
takes the spring
That'd be great.
season for it.
Is this only high schoolers or is it
Yes,
Yeah.
right now, unified sports are only at the high school level.
Okay.
Some schools have started talking about it, but it hasn't gotten down there yet.
All right.
If we can maybe just make a note that like, it would be great to have a summary of how the year went at the like springtime. I know you do kind of a wrap up of athletics, but to also hear about this. And I mean, to me, I think let's start the way you've proposed, but we're constantly thinking about how to make the school district buildings better connected to the community. So I think to Rob's point, like community bocce courts could be kind of a low cost, nice thing
Yeah,
for the
they could
bocce
be.
players and the, like, so I think this could be something a little bit bigger without,
Absolutely.
it'd be cool, great to see how it's going.
What kind of training, if any, do you provide for the partners?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. So there is a sort of an immersive coaching session right at the beginning of the league where all of the coaches get sort of the nitty gritty on what bocce is. And then I'm not sure if there is on it training for the partners.
Yeah, so I know the Special Olympics holds the coaches meeting that kind of goes everything that is, looked upon, required from the coaches. And they provide all kinds of resources and things like that. There's not a specific training that our coaches are going through that are required of our students. But, I know our coaches are going through safety things with our students. They're going to review the rules of the games and stuff like that. So nothing extensive, but, I know we have coaches that are already interested that, are great with these students that are going to make sure that they get the right, information about the sport that they're playing, as well as safety guidelines.
Because it's special ed, Jess, do they get information about the student's disability and how best to manage the student if it's a behavioral situation?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that they, they're maintaining their relationship with the student appropriately.
Yeah, I think it's on the spot sort of modeling and coaching from the coaches. So we have a head coach for the other sports, but there's other support staff as well. Sometimes students will also bring their teaching assistants from during the day to the sport. So there's a lot of on the spot working through those pieces as they arise.
Yeah, we work together to communicate with the coaches on just registering for the teams so that they're prepared going into things. And as Jess said, if they're required to have a TA or something like that with them in the school day, to make sure that they're also accommodated during this after school activity.
I'm just curious, like thinking about program, like broadly, like has there been any experience of students, and I'm just wondering perspective wise, experiencing stigma around having a disability, or because I know sometimes students with disability, they want to play right. And I think directionally, I love the program. I like everything about it, but I'm just wondering how are some of the students experiencing it, and how do they see anything or are they feeling like the same as everyone else participating in particular sports?
I mean, when I'm looking at our basketball program, one thing, everyone loves being part of that program. Coach Tabacco coaches everyone just like she coaches her varsity basketball team, and makes a great environment for that, and finds an area for them to excel in. Along with that, we have a cheerleading portion to it. Just getting everyone involved, and I haven't seen anything where that's become an issue, and I think it's the way they operate on a daily basis. It's just like one of our other athletic programs, and that's how we operate.
It was really special. Before they played their last game at MVP, all the students in Columbia lined the halls and had signs just like they would for any other sports team. And that was just a really nice moment, I think, for the community.
Nice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Do you have a question?
I appreciated that you picked up on it, and my question rose out of misunderstanding. I later, maybe to address it a whole nother time, because when you just said disabilities and Special Olympics, that can also refer to physical disabilities, and that's obviously a discussion for a whole nother meeting. I misunderstood that you were talking about the students with intellectual disabilities.
Okay. Yeah.
Bocce would be a great game for some of the kids with physical disabilities.
Yeah, I think it adds.
But my questions were tied to that.
Yeah, happy to answer any questions. I think it does add additional opportunities for students with more mobility needs than probably running up and down the basketball courts. I feel like it increases inclusivity with that piece too.
Okay, can we switch to our next topic?
Sure.
So late in June, early in July, Mr. Jones had become aware of a potential regulatory change that was coming regarding the APP process, or the athletic placement process. And the Board of Regents did go ahead, go ahead and adopt that change. So typically this would be something that we would send to our full policy committee, because some of this is directly related to Board of Education policy, but given the timeliness of wanting to implement this for the beginning of the new school year, Mr. Jones did put together an ad hoc committee inclusive of myself, 2 of our building administrators, our athletic trainer, our district physician, and he did have some input, I think, from some of the other members of the athletic department along the way as well. So what's in front of you tonight are some recommended changes that we would like to discuss with you, hopefully for a first read to change to the policy tonight, inclusive of some of the regulatory practice that would change within the district as well, with the hope of ironing out anything that you might like to see changed. Mrs. Harris is here also to discuss any ancillary concerns that may come up with nursing as a relation to this change. Then on the 24th, we, barring any unforeseen circumstances, would be asking the board to adopt the new policy so that as our student athletes come back for the new year, the new policy is in place and we're in compliance with what the state has changed to. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Jones to give just a little bit of history and then talk through the proposal that sits in front of you for a first read tonight for policy change. So Mr. Jones, I'll turn it over to you.
Okay, great. So the 5280 document, the first document is the overall policy for athletics. And there was just a minor change in there that was specifying that the health services office is doing our health history review. The policy was stating that our school medical director was the one completing that. That's not historically how that takes place. It's, the health office that reviews those. And that's kind of an important piece as we move into the next piece. That will be the 5280 regulation, which talks about APP, athletic placement process, that recently had some regulation changes from the state. So moving over to that document, the state, as Dr. Coates mentioned, rolled out some information that they were making changes to the APP process. One of the main things was that they were removing the Tanner score, which is the maturity chart that your primary physicians would complete when a student went for their physical. And then they were also making some changes to, what is required as part of the physical fitness process. And then the next step to that is we used to have everything completed, all this paperwork completed and then turned over to our school medical director for signing off. The changes from the state now do not require the school medical director to sign off. They are taking the physical from the primary doctor of that child, and that is all that they need from the primary doctor. It no longer requires our medical director to be the one that is approving that student. So to revise our regulation to meet these changes and just to kind of update some of the wording that we used, we are still requiring that, and the state requiring that a parent is the one that is signing off that this child is eligible to participate at the higher level, which is something that we feel is very important now that, yes, it was always part of it, but that's step one, that unless that parent is signing off that they give permission for their child to compete at the higher level, we can't move forward with the process. When they sign off that paper, they would submit it to the athletic office. Then from there, it would really start the process that we're putting in place for reviewing someone to be eligible to try out for the high school level. And what that would include is, I would receive that document. I would probably touch base with the principal of Goff Middle School just to review that child, making sure that there's no concerns about them moving forward with the next phases of our placement process. And then at the bottom here is talking about the fitness test. It was formerly the presidential physical fitness test. And for the longest time, this test was required for everyone to take part in as part of the APP process. The new regulations do not require this specific test, but we feel that it's something that's been working for a number of years. It's concrete information to look at as part of a testing process. So we felt it was important to continue doing that. So we mentioned that in here that, students must continue to meet the 85th percentile of this test, completing 4 out of the 5 testing components for meeting their age level. So that is a part of that.
Just for clarity on that too, part of the regulatory change does allow for a district to implement additional measures to evaluate whether they feel comfortable with a student athlete being able to play up in sports.
Yeah, the new regulation mentions and states that a physical fitness testing portion is still part of the process, but they are no longer determining exactly what that is. But we feel that this has worked. It's a measure in there that is still having someone to provide, physical abilities. Because at the end of the day, the APP process is to, find someone that is elite to move up to the next level. It's not just opening the door for everyone at the middle school level to go up to the high school level.
Quick question, because development could differ drastically, like we did like 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade. So I'm just wondering, when we say like 85 percentile for their age, like I'm just wondering, like how does that fit like with their development, and what is that saying to the process overall?
So there's a chart that is provided from the state.
Yep.
That is what we've been using, and that's pretty much what we're going to continue to use. They had set those numbers. It was based on
Like that, does it grow? Like what I'm wondering is though, like how does the change? Like, so if we say like a typical 6th grader, like if we say like a female 6th grader versus a female 8th grader, right? Like, so if it's like a mile run or sit-ups, I'm just wondering, like, prospectively, like how does even those charts like relate like to what development difference look like from 85% number?
I don't know 100% how they created the chart, but I just know they created a chart based on a child's age, and they feel that based on an age of this child, what they can achieve at a certain thing like the mile or push-ups, they somehow have a formula that equates to the same thing as a 9th grader or 10th grader.
If you can't do it if you're not 85th percentile as an 8th grader, you're not going to be capable of it at the JV or varsity level.
Yeah. And we feel this is important because we feel, this shouldn't just open the door for anyone to go up and try out for the higher levels, in some of these sports, there's safety, contact sports, there's a lot of safety measures that we need to consider. Sometimes there's, in wrestling, there's low weight classes, but someone that's in 7th grade at a low weight class may not be ready to go against someone in 10th grade at a low weight class. So, these are some of the things that we feel are important to keep in part of.
I'm sorry to cut you off. I know you have more. Why don't you finish? It has nothing to do.
Can I just say, Jesse, just to correct me if I'm wrong, but 6th graders can't participate.
No, it's just
So it's really 7th and 8th grade. It's
7th
not
and
6th
8th
grade, right? So
right.
Yeah, 7th and 8th grade or that's when we start modified at 7th. And from there is when they are eligible for interscholastic athletics. The top of the next page just talks about how, the health examination for any sport that's still required as part of the APP process. So they would submit their, health exam to the health office along with their registration. And then we would review everything along with, completing the physical fitness test. And if they meet all the requirements, we would make them eligible to try out. And that's important that they're now eligible to try out does not guarantee that they are going to be at the higher level. Sure, we have some sports that we don't cut at all, like our track programs, there's typically, no one that's, removed from those situations, but some of our other sports that are highly competitive tryouts, they'll have the opportunity, but there's no guarantee. And then just stating in here that these revisions are updates along with the newly established regulations from the Board of Regents.
So, go ahead.
Is there any limit on the number of times they can attempt to pass the test?
We don't have that currently in place, but there's times where we have conversations. If this season's already up and running, and we have those conversations that it's not going to work out right now, that we can try again next season or next year. I usually look at those numbers with our physical education teachers who do, majority of the testing, as well as Sean Leggett, our athletic trainer, who, oversees a lot of the paperwork and things like that.
But if they come out and try to do the mile run and miss it by 5 seconds, can they come out the next day and try it again to see if whatever, they got a better night's sleep, they ate a better breakfast?
Yes. We are very accommodating in that. And a lot of the testing starts in their physical education class. So, we'll get numbers from there. That'll be the first run that we have. And then now that we know they're interested in, trying up, we'll contact them, say, hey, this is where you're at. This is what you need to do. And then we'll go from there.
So Ryan, this real substantive change here is kind of removing this district position. How, when he was reviewing this, that was just simply a paperwork review, correct? He wasn't meeting with students?
No. Yeah, he was the one reviewing Tanner scores,
Right.
How they did on the physical fitness
Mhm.
test, that they were meeting the requirements. He was really just reviewing paperwork and making
Okay.
sure everything was met. So there's not major changes in that regard. I think just the biggest change is, the Tanner score is no
Right.
longer used, and it may be a little bit of an outdated use,
Mhm.
but it was something that kind of dictated where we
Mhm.
would place someone, because there was also a chart for Tanner score, and
Yep.
someone may pass the physical fitness test, but their Tanner score wasn't there, so they weren't eligible to go up, or their Tanner score was a 3 instead of a 4, and 3 says they can do freshman,
Mhm.
but 4 says they can do JV or varsity. So there was, some of that to it, but I think, continuing to do the fitness testing will really help us determine where, someone should have the opportunity to try out.
Correct me if I'm wrong though, but Dr. Albert felt very strongly that the district needed an additional measure as an evaluative point to determine whether a student really was physically fit to move forward in the process. to
Meaning
try
the
out.
fitness test or something in
The
addition to that?
the fitness test.
Yeah, absolutely. And then just kind of going back to what I mentioned on the first page of the 5280, if there's other things that may require someone not to participate in sports, and this isn't just for the APP, but also applies to it. If someone has multiple concussions,
Yeah.
or we feel that there's other health concerns, that's when we can, we can consult with Dr. Albert, and he does have the ability to then, intervene and, talk to that person's primary and see if they really are a fit for,
Mhm.
interscholastic athletics at that time.
So I had two questions. One, on the first page at the third paragraph at the end, and I mean, it's not already in there, and I'm just wondering, the parent says, I want my kid to try out for varsity. But really you need to have the discussions that happen in the program about that individual. That kid isn't a varsity player, but kid says, I want to try out for varsity. Should there be any language around there that includes something about the discretion, at the discretion of, the level that the student can try out at is also at the discretion of the head of the program, because otherwise you could, worst case scenario, right? I got 10 eighth graders that want to come out and try out for varsity, and not one of them are really, right? So now
Yeah.
you got your 10 eighth graders playing with, and obviously
Yeah, that was my question. That's
right. I'm
Yeah.
thinking from the basketball perspective where, they're going to get hurt, right? And so as a program lead, you want to say, look, it's more appropriate to try out for Mount 9 or JV. Should there be language in there, or do you feel like that's
No, I think that that's something good to add in there. And part of the whole part where I said I would speak to the Goff principle,
Mhm.
I think that's one step to that. But I think receiving someone, because they have to put on their application what level they would be interested in. I think if we go another step and say, I would then consult with the varsity coach about, where does this player belong at tryouts? I think that's something that we could add in there, that, hey, this person wants to try out for varsity. Coach like, well, I probably should try out for freshman. We can put something in like that.
Yeah, I just think so that when you get the parent that says, well, I said I wanted them to try out for varsity.
Yeah.
You want to have, I think, some leeway
Yes.
to say, well, it's got to be fit within the constructs of the program.
what would you have done 2 years ago? Like, you would just say, you had the discretion to just say no. How does that work? That was,
You'd have them run through the first day and say, we're going to have you go try out for JV tomorrow, or
Okay.
if you're really at Mod 9. I mean, if I'm forced, this is where I'm coming from, is if I'm forced by this to say, all right, parents said varsity, come for the first day, I'm going to do a set of evaluations and show, you're 5 seconds behind in the 40-yard dash or whatever, we would do, standardized tests to show skills. And then we would say, well, here's all the varsity players that, 10th, 11th, 12th, and here's their numbers, and here's your numbers. You really need to be at a lower level. And you would say next day you're coming down, but that doesn't prevent the parent from saying before all that, well, I said varsity, so they got to try out for varsity.
That's why I really worry about 85%, because I feel like the numbers is like for elite level, it's like 90, 95, 99.
I don't think, Jesse, I don't think that, I mean,
It's like the
I've-
first entry point.
Yeah.
it's the
right?
first
Yeah.
entry point, right?
That's
And
the
I think,
ability to try out.
yeah. And I think that test, I mean, I coached in this district for 25 years. I never really saw a kid come out where you're like, whoa, they should not be at this level, right? And I mean, I'm talking basketball, obviously, but I'm sure in football, you're not putting a kid out there in pads, right? Or, somebody's playing tennis and they get, they have no idea how to swing the racket.
I could see
And
it
a
in
bonk in the
soccer,
head,
though.
right? So
Yeah, a little
See that
bit.
in soccer.
A little bit. We have some come up for soccer. But when we had this committee meeting, we talked about it. We said there's been, Sean and I have been in this for 12 years. There was one football player that came up and it was during COVID. And the kid has got all the records in our weight room and lifting. And it was the one kid. And so it's not like we have a ton of people lining up to, certain contact sports to come up. But, there are some areas. But I do think, adding into that, consulting with the varsity coach about where they feel this player should be best placed for tryouts would be beneficial.
I had a second question. It should be quick because I think you've identified it. But say that when I first was reading this, I was thinking, all right, how do you address a conflict where a personal physician who has no idea about the requirements of a certain sport, but all right, this kid's healthy, I'm going to sign off. But your staff, the either principal or Sean or somebody says, yeah, no, this student isn't ready. Do you just let it play through the physical testing, the fitness testing and all that and address it with Dr. Albert afterwards? Is that how you
For the
deal with
most part,
conflict?
we would, move to the physical fitness testing unless, if I speak to, the golf principal and there's a major issue. But we would go to the physical fitness testing, see where the results come from there. If they blow it out of the park and we gotta, take a look at that. But a lot of times if, they're not going to test well, then that's kind of where things end.
I think your question, when I first looked at the materials, I thought it said something about the personal physician signing off on the player trying out to play up. But the language that I'm looking at right here just says private healthcare provider states that the student can participate in athletics. So is it just, does the personal physician just certify that they can participate in athletics, or are we actually asking for to render their opinion about whether this 8th grader can try out for varsity?
No, they're just completing the physical, just like any
Like
other
they used to
student.
do. So it's not talking about playing up. It's
Yeah.
just this kid is ready to participate,
Yeah.
is healthy enough to participate in athletics generally. And then
Yeah, just like any other student trying out for any other sport, they're going to their doctor, filling out the New York State physical form. And it just used to be, you had the physical form plus the Tanner chart that they would fill out.
Mhm.
Now it's just the same thing, but no Tanner chart. So they're not necessarily telling us, hey, this kid is going to be ready to play varsity. They're just telling us, their current physical state based on their, evaluation.
And that's from my perspective, not even from the department perspective, that's the biggest shift that we've now set on the shelf a little bit, the role of the district physician and the process. And that's what concerns me. It becomes more of a consult rather than a gatekeeper. To Dr. Harrison's point, if you get that overly zealous parent that says, my kid's a varsity football player, we still have an obligation as the system to protect that child if it's not appropriate for him to be placed in whatever that sport may be.
I just want to say just quickly, when my daughters got cut from softball, I passed them the 20-year-old male numbers. I said, look, girls, it's a marathon, not a race, but if you get these numbers by 11.
Is it too late to pass this on the 24th? I don't know when the sports start for.
No, I think that modified doesn't start until after that anyway.
Okay.
Yeah, football starts the 27th But this is for our students that are going
Yeah.
up. So the 24th is the start for our sports outside of football.
So the answer is no, but it's going to be a very quick turnaround time on the athletics department. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're operating kind of how we've operated because
Mhm.
we can't. So we're getting Tanner scores. We just kind of know.
Yeah.
In the end, they're not going to be the determinant.
Do you have, because there's a 30-day window, so so fall sports have to be in, right? Do you have requests to play up
We
for
do
the
right
fall
now.
sports right now?
Yes.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
we're just treating it as under the old regime.
Yeah. So it's pretty much everything is the same that we're gathering, along with the parent permission. It's just that we are getting those Tanner scores that, ultimately won't matter.
Yeah, personally, I'm glad we're getting rid of those because not only do I think they're antiquated, but I've heard stories about people going in the day before to urgent care and the doctor literally saying, "What Tanner score do you need?"
Yeah.
Right.
There's your 4.
Mhm.
So I made note of the one change to add the consultation collaboration with the program director. Also, there was one clerical change that a board member pointed out that we can address after the meeting. So we'll have an updated version of this ready for the board. We'll run it through before the next board meeting
Okay.
just for another glance. And then we'll have it ready hopefully for adoption on the 24th. Okay. Last but not least, one of the things that we did start to do in policy committee at the end of last year was look at our academic eligibility policy. And the one thing I want to be clear about, the academic eligibility policy, we use the word policy. It's not truly a policy. It's a practice within the district. Nowhere does it sit in Board of Education policy that this is something that has been reviewed and or adopted by the board. I've asked Ryan, though, to highlight the changes that we have been discussing, only because obviously we want you to be informed on what the practice will be. Ryan's going to run through some of the highlights of the conversations that we've had. We've had our teachers, we've had our coaches involved in this process to discuss the why are we looking at this again, and then really how we're still encouraging participation by making these changes. What we're trying to do is not discourage participation. We want to encourage participation, but at the same time, we want our students to stay focused on the real reason that they're here. The real reason that they're here is to stay focused on their academics so that post-high school, they can be successful, having athletics be a very integral part of their lives and helping them stay connected to school and beyond. But we need to find a little bit, what we think is a little bit better balance with what the practice has been. So with that, I'm going to let Ryan highlight some of the changes that we discussed and what we intend to move forward with.
All right, great. So just kind of looking at our current policy that we have for academics with athletics, the policy doesn't really say much. It just kind of says, if someone isn't doing great in school and the parents feel that way, they could reach out to us and remove them from athletics, which, can kind of happen at any point in time still, but it didn't really say anything about, how they were standing with their academic marks and things like that. You could be failing every class and our current policy doesn't say that we could do anything about it. So, we brought this to the Code of Conduct Committee. We started talking about an academic policy and then, we went to CCS, brought it up, talked about it with the CCS, brought it to Academic Council, and, just got everyone's thoughts, ideas on it. And it seemed like everyone was on the same page that, yes, we need to do a little bit more to, hold accountable our student athletes. So we're looking at doing a review evaluation period. It's kind of just based on the progress reports, the 5-week progress reports and the report cards. And at that time, we would have the coach review how students are doing grade wise based on what their progress reports or report cards say. Not every coach has access to Power School and things like that to continuously review what grades are, but we talked about, whenever they're notified, so coach will be notified, hey, these reports just went out, I'll be the one notifying them. And we talked about within a week, they need to review what those reports say from the students. And the students, I'm sure on their phone or on their device that, Chromebooks, things like that, can pull up Power School, show their coach. If coach can look, has any questions, they can put it away. But what coaches will be required to do is report back to me within that week students and if they're failing any courses. And it could be one course, it could be two, it can be or many number of courses that they're failing. But I would ask the coach for name, what the course is, and things like that, so that we can then start our tier 1 of academic probation. And probation comes when you are failing 2 or more courses. Just because someone's failing one course doesn't mean we're not concerned about it. We would still kind of encourage them to get extra help. I put something in that I'll also kind of converse with the teacher, kind of be like, hey, so and so's on this team, they're in your course, they're failing this class. They've been encouraged to get some extra help. That might kind of open the doors for some things. But anyone that's failing 2 or more courses, we put on academic probation. And what that means is they will need to work on improving their grades. And it's important to say that they're working on improving. It's not saying, hey, within a week, they got to go from failing to passing. Depending on where they're at or what kind of student they may be, it may not be possible for them to go failing and passing in 1 week, 2 weeks, however much time it may be. But what we want to implement is that, 1, we want them to know that there's resources there to support them. But 2, we want to just make sure that they're not just blowing things off or using sports as their excuse. We want to make sure that they're, trying to be better students and things like that along those lines. So putting them on probation means that they would be issued I have a sample here, it would just be a student weekly academic report, and it would be paper. It's not going to be electronic where they get an email to them and they don't even look at it or something like that. It'll be paper, and it'll be required to be completed weekly based on whatever they do to take care of their academic needs. And with that, it can be seeing a teacher for help before school, after school, visiting an LRC, using a study hall for help, seeking a tutor. I brought this up at CCS and academic council, and one of the teachers there was like, well, NHS has tutors. Would that count? And I said, absolutely, as long as, we want the adults being the ones signing off that these, students met. I wouldn't want to peer-to-peer being the one signing off on someone's, academic reports. But sure, if someone's utilizing the tutors for that subject, we want to open the doors that, whatever they're willing to do to help improve their grade will work. And so at the end of each week, they would be required to bring this to myself or to their coach, or if, we get some of the other principals or administrators involved, bring it to them. And it's pretty much the person that they met with, the adult signing off saying they met this week's requirements. They're showing progress or whatever it may be. And, there will be some follow-up as well that, if they're seeing a tutor, or the tutor may not necessarily know exactly what their classroom grade is. So there's some of that would require, following up with a teacher as well. Or, I have access to all students' grades on Power School, so I could log in and see, all right, are they really making progress? If I see grade goes up, sure, all right, they're making progress. If I see it's either going down or something like that, I'll reach out to the teacher. Hey, are they doing what they need to do? So that is, probation. And a student would remain on probation until either their grade is above passing, and, for, having less than 2 failing classes, or if they complete their weekly progress report, they would remain on probation, meaning they're still eligible to participate in practice and in competitions as long as they're doing what's required. If at any time they just don't do this, blow it off, not interested in doing it, they would move to tier 2, which is suspension. We're not looking, as Dr. Cook said, we're not looking to remove anyone from athletics. We just want to encourage them to be a little bit better on this, the study side of things. So the only time someone would be removed is if they're just completely not buying into the program. Then they would be put on suspension. And, the only thing to get them off of suspension would be to start completing this part of it or bringing their grades above passing. And say, someone 5-week progress report comes out, they get put on probation. 2 weeks later, if they're passing, they can come off. They don't have to do these requirements anymore. But again, 5 weeks later, at that report card, end of the quarter, the check's coming again, and they may be off, but hey, they can be put right back on. So, that is a piece to it.
Trent, and you may not have thought about this, but what if a student is failing 2 classes and you present this with them and they go, I don't want to do that. I'll take care of them. I'll get my grades up. What, do they immediately go on suspension if they're not going to even participate in the program, or do they have till the next quarter to get the grades up? What do you do with a kid like that?
I think we need to keep it uniform for everyone, that, they need to do something that shows their, it could even be they go see the teacher, they sit in the room and do their work, that the teacher knows they're doing it. But I think it's got to be uniform across the board, that if we put this in place and you're on probation, you're on probation until you're off, you do the requirements to come off probation.
So I guess I'm saying if a kid just says, I don't need that, I'll get my grades up on my own, and says, I'm not even going to think about participating in that, do they immediately get suspended then until their grades get up? Do they have a period of time to get their grades up before they get?
I think right then and there, within that week of the coach reviewing, that they're going to be put on probation right there. And if they refuse, when that next check comes up for the probation check, then they would be put on suspension.
So and just to back up what Ryan's saying, the goal of the conversations that we have is to encourage dialogue between not just students, but between families and faculty. It may be as simple as, okay, I don't want to sit there and get extra help and have the teacher do problems or have them teach me how to write an essay. But to Ryan's point, if they're in the room, if they're 6 assignments behind in math class, if it's nothing more than a structured after-school study hall where they're getting caught up, it's for them to show they're taking accountability for what they fell behind on. So,
and I get that piece. I'm just suggesting a situation where a kid and maybe is either backed up by the parents or the parents are just not participating, and a kid says, I don't need that, I'll get my grades up on my own. Do we just have something in the policy to say, if this is your attitude, then this is the consequence for that?
And to Ryan's point, I think we need to stand behind what we are implementing and immediately go to, at a bare minimum, probation. And if the student really disengages, then we have to consider suspension, but we can't just quote unquote take their word for it. We have to, there has to be a mechanism of accountability. And I understand what you're saying. I just think there needs to be if we're going to call it accountability, we need to hold them accountable.
The language
Okay,
just says
great.
it's mandatory.
Yeah.
So there's mandatory terms and conditions, which includes the academic help and weekly progress.
Right. So I guess I'm just saying, what if so it's mandatory. So if a kid says, I'm not participating, what's the consequence of that? Because this is mandatory, do they automatically go on athletic suspension until they get their grades up? I'm just saying we should spell out that consequence in case we have a kid that just says.
Well, it wouldn't be immediate. We would find out they're failing, and then it would be, okay, well, you can say that, but you do, you have a week, whatever the progress, when it's due. And if it doesn't come in showing that they've made an effort, then they would go to level 2.
Or if in that week they do become passing, they would just get signed off once and they would be off
but it
the
would,
probation.
they would have a period.
But yes, if they don't fulfill the requirements, then they're
Okay, so it'd be a week and then they would go to
Yeah.
level 2. If they just said, if they didn't show up, if they didn't turn in a form, it'd just be a week and then they go to level 2.
All right, perfect. I just want to say, like, personally, I'm a little concerned, like, just a bit concerned, right? Like, for some students, right, sports is the brightest spot of their academic, life, right? And it's just like some students who struggle academically, right, struggle behaviorally, struggle coming into school. I just worry about kids who, school is the biggest attraction of attending school, period, right? So it's like, I'm wondering, kids like that, and also like grades sometimes for kids like that are not always equal. So like, for example, like if you get a long-term suspension, right, you have out of school placement, you probably have an easier time having higher grades, right, than a student who's in school now, like, so how does that look, right? I know I used to spend a lot of time on, you go 3, 4, 5 hours and you get 3 worksheets and it's like, I had straight A's, right? And it's like, that's not exactly.
There'd be other consequences if they're out of school for the academic. We have not just academic, we have other policies in place for the code of conduct if they're suspended from school.
I think your point is one really well taken that we talked about a lot in this process. For some students, varsity basketball may be the only reason that they come to school. So one of the reasons that we wrote the policy the way it is, not that you need to go from a 50 to a 57. We just want you to demonstrate you recognize that there's a problem with your academics and you're putting in some extra effort to try to raise your grades while still being allowed to participate.
That's what I was hearing.
Yeah.
That's the reason why when I hear like shift into level 2, it's a, you know, because I love to add like the way what I was hearing was like the incentive, right? Dialogue.
You
And it's,
can still participate as long as you meet us in the middle somewhere. Please remember your focus is it's your academics.
Yeah.
And one of the things I talked about, Ryan had invited last year a great presentation from one of our parents who is an NCAA college scholarship advisor. And let's say there's 150 people in the auditorium. He said, of the 150 here, 90% of you will never play college athletics. The next 10% of you, and I'm making up the numbers, I don't remember exactly what he said. The next 10% of you will try, but 1% of you will get a college scholarship. That puts it in perspective on sports clubs and activities are going to keep kids focused on school and they're a great attractor. But we always need to remember really the skills and the academics that they learn in their classrooms. We have to prioritize that.
Yeah.
Ryan, I had a couple of questions. One is, are you going to roll this out to the students? Because this will be a big change from what you said was in place, and now they have a lot of steps. I think this is going to be management challenging for you guys. There's a lot of pieces of paper and sign off. So just talk to us a little bit about how this is going to be facilitated.
Yeah, so I did put some procedures together on a separate page. I'm not sure if that was shared with you guys or not. So one, this will be talked about at our media coaches night. So there it'll be kind of rolled out to everyone that, you know, it's there to kind of like, hey, this is what's going on. Also, this is what time you're supposed to be in school every day. So that's also something that we'll talk about. So we'll put that out there, but it starts, you know, when that progress report time comes up or the report card time, you know, it'll start from an email from me to our coaches. And from there, that's when our window opens for within 1 week. That's when I need them to report the data back to me with the students' names and, you know, their academic standings. Then from there, you know, my office will issue the progress reports, and, you know, I'll meet with the students, you know, call them down to pick that up and, you know, let them know, you know, what's required of them. And then, you know, weekly it'll be them to carry this form, bring it back to a coach or myself, and just, you know, on here, it kind of states at the end that it's signed off on me if they're eligible or ineligible for the following week. So yeah, I think it's going to be a lot of paperwork to start and some oversight, but I think once we get the ball rolling, I think, you know, it's going to take care of itself. I also don't think we have a large number of students this really applies to.
Yeah.
I just think, you know, we just get surprised once in a while where there is someone that it's like, hey, really, I didn't know that was going on. So I think this is more of just something to, you know, kind of, you know, check in on everyone, kind of see how things are going. And I think a lot of our kids, they're probably capable of taking care of their grades, but if no one's really checking them on it, you know, do they care all that much? So I think kind of once we establish it, I think, you know, the kids are going to take care of what they need to take care of if they don't want me chasing them down the hallway.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of how many kids we're talking about, like in a given season? I mean, what percentage or what number?
I don't know off the top of my head.
I mean, a handful, probably.
Probably a handful that are failing 2 or more.
Yeah.
You know, some come up that, you know, this person's failing this course and they've been holding on to all their assignments and didn't turn them in until later. But, you know, I think, you know, again, having this in place, that'll.
What about kids with an IEP?
Well, we did include Mrs. Harris in this conversation, and don't limit it just to students with IEPs. Executive functioning. Students that are going to struggle with the sheet of paper, and we turn that conversation to, well, let's use the process to teach them and help them then. You know, if we keep our focus on the goal here is not to exclude, but to teach and to teach how to improve and take accountability, that we won't get into the point where a kid puts a stake in the ground and says, I ain't doing it. I'm not going to do this. Versus, okay, I want to play. So therefore, how do I figure out how to work through this process together with the people that are willing to help me?
And I worked at a school that had an even stricter policy. It was any grade below 75 in a single course puts you here. And I never had a student refuse to participate in the program. In fact, I would be sad when their sports season ended because their best grades of the year were in that sports season because they wanted to play sports. And if this was what they had to do to play sports, this is what they did to play their sports. My one question for you, Ryan, and it's probably assumed, but I'm just wondering if we should make it a little bit more clear. They have the sheet where they get signed off. I'm just thinking, a student is struggling in math and science, but they go to the writing resource center. Like, to me, that doesn't exactly, it's extra help, but it's not the extra help they needed.
Yeah.
Is there a way to track that they're getting help in the courses they need the help in?
Yeah, I mean, we can tweak this form and kind of put that in the language. That's, I put in there what was the academic help session. I can be a little more specific in that and ensuring it's the correct subject they're getting help.
Right.
So if somebody went to the LRC because they had math, but then this gets signed off by, Coach Gibson or something, right?
Yeah.
That would, I guess it's easy to flag, but that puts
Yeah.
more pressure on these guys. To do
It does.
that.
Unfortunately, it does. But if we want to make this effective, we have to do that. When I participated in the program, it was always the course teacher who signed off, saying that they had met the goals. Because in the end, that's the person giving the grade. We also didn't have all these options like the LRC and National Honor Society. Like, it really was the course teacher that was doing that.
Yeah.
I just want to be sure that the help they're getting, it's not just showing up at the after school homework club and doodling in their notebook.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. And we talked about it being the teacher, but we didn't want to just narrow it down to that these are the only options that they have. So we did want to keep that door open. And, sometimes, teachers are only available at certain times, or it may be after school, but I got to put that kid on a bus to go to Janae for a practice and stuff like that. So we didn't want to narrow it so much that, we're going to hinder them becoming eligible.
But just making sure it's somewhat related to the course that they need help with.
Ryan, you're going to be going over each of these forms with the kids personally. So couldn't you just write the subject? In those numbered boxes.
Yep.
And that way the person is signing off that the person got help in geometry.
Yeah. That's the idea, that it is in there.
Yeah,
The
that's
subject
perfect.
will be in there.
Yeah,
That will fill it in.
somebody in your office just
Yep.
fill that out. So you're making sure they're addressing the topics they need to
Yep.
address.
Yeah, for sure.
I had a question about the procedures. If I'm imagining I'm a student, so I'm a student athlete. I'm failing 2 classes, so I'm on probation. In procedure number 6, I'm on probation until I'm no longer failing 2 or more courses. Is it okay if I just get help for 1 course? I get above 65%, and then I'm only failing 1. And I don't have I don't mean that as an opinion, but I can imagine a student just thinking strategically, okay, let me just put all my effort into this 1 course. My peers can fail 1 course and not be on probation. So I don't know what might happen in that situation.
So for that week, they would need to get help in both courses. But I guess technically after that week, if one of them becomes passing, they're no longer on the probation. So they may still be failing that other course that they're not really focusing on. That may be a game that they play, but it would technically take them off of the probation. But we would try to keep that dialogue going with their teacher to.
That's how it's written. So that's
And I just want to refocus the thought here. This is a radical shift.
Yes.
This is, we have nothing to we have something. I think the real focus is the engagement between not just the student athlete, but the families and the staff. There are absolutely going to be issues. There's going to be a student that says, look what it says. You're absolutely right. I improved on the 1. But I think philosophically, if we are saying as a school, as an athletic department, our focus is on your academics, a lot of these things we can improve upon as we go. This is just such a significant, I forget who said it already. This is such a significant shift that I hope it speaks volumes to our faculty and to our families. We're trying to refocus. And I think that we'll be able to iron out a lot of these issues as they come up. I'm anticipating exactly what Ryan said. We're not talking about 50% of our student athletes. We're talking about a very small I hope I'm not going to make a liar out of myself. We're talking about a very small number of our student athletes here, and that this will only improve our programs even more.
I think though, I think that's a great framing. Then I kind of wonder if the policy needs to like be written to reflect that. So I think like I'm very hung up on this probation is 2 weeks. But then in the other thing, it says you're on probation for as long as you need to be on probation. And then we have mandatory terms and conditions, and you need to meet all of them or just be showing progress. Because I mean, I don't know if actually 2 weeks is enough time to get your grade up. Like, is that, and if a student is really working, but maybe they haven't had an exam yet or something like, I don't know. I think the intent is really great. Maybe the policy just needs to sort of mirror that in a way. Like, so, and I'm kind of confused. Like, so you're on 2 weeks and then it's either you go to suspension, but then here it says you continue on probation. And so I think just aligning the two, and maybe not actually being as rigid as like the time periods is actually like the intent of what we're trying to accomplish.
But if you're not rigid, then people will use it to their advantage.
No, but I'm not saying not be rigid about what we want our standards to be. I'm saying about the element of time, because it sounds like here you're on probation for 2 weeks. And then if you don't do something, you go to suspension. Or like, and then we just said, like, I think we're kind of at times very rigid and at times not rigid. And I think we need to sort of pick.
So Ryan, we can work on language that changes, certain things to checkpoints rather than transition points.
Yes.
There will be a check-in at 2 weeks to determine next steps.
Yeah, maybe like a minimum, like a 2 week start to really like invest resources in a student or encourage the investment of resources or that kind of thing.
Makes sense.
It's like the attendance policy, right? The language and how we frame it is a positive intervention rather than, we're holding your feet to the fire. Did I miss this? Is this just high school or is it modified in high school?
It's all interscholastic athletics, so 7th through 12th.
So I'm just going to bring up another, if a student, because in middle school, it's not credit bearing, so they can technically fail 2 classes and move up to the next grade levels. Anything taken into consideration that they're entering the fall sport and have a history of failure from the spring. And I mean that in a, we talked about, we don't want kids not to participate, but we also don't want them to have too much on their plate and set them up to, have a struggling. And I think it would be difficult for 9th graders because it's a whole new game, no pun intended, but that 7th to 8th grade, if they have failure in that 7th grade, can they participate? Do they get a clean slate every year?
I've kind of looked at it. You get a clean slate, kind of give them a fresh start. Maybe they matured a little bit over the summer or shifted their focus. So, I don't want to, have a kid worrying all summer that they're not eligible to start a season. But, I think we do need to hold them accountable once, the season starts and the school year starts.
Great.
All right. We can work together and we can make some cleanup and we'll get just a modified version of this so everyone understands what we're walking into the new year with.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks, Ryan.
So one last item. It's always an exciting night when we're going to appoint new faculty to join our staff. And I'm going to ask Mr. Mahar to introduce 2 of our new candidates that are with us tonight to be appointed.
Right, so we're fortunate tonight to have the opportunity with the consent agenda to approve 3 new teachers, 2 of which I see out here in the audience. And I hope I get the pronunciation right. Is it Leanna Frauenberger? Yeah. I said it right. Okay, that was a little bit of a shock. So Leanna, thanks for coming tonight. Leanna comes to us from Catskill Central School District. And you have a handful of years of experience in special education. And she will be working at the Donald P. Southern Elementary School in a new program that Mrs. Harris has initiated with the other administrators called Communication Skills. So welcome. And we also have Sophia Goodacre, who comes to us from Taconic Hill Central School District. and has also worked for a handful of years in primary grades, kindergarten first, I believe. Am I right? Okay, and those interviews were several weeks ago, so my memory's not all that bad. And I stayed up this late to do this. So, welcome aboard, and I'm really gonna hope the board approves you tonight.
And thank you for being here. You know, when you come to join a new organization, I know it's a summer night and there's other things you could be doing, but it speaks volumes of what we hope that your dedication will be to our district, that you took the time to be with us tonight. So thank you. With that, I'll turn it back to you.
All right. I see no discussion items. So moving to regular business, the copier lease agreement with Questar 3. Any comments or questions on that one? Okay, motion to approve. Kathy, second. Cindy, all those in favor? Okay, the resolution authorizing the social media representation agreement. Anybody have any comments or questions on that? Okay, motion, or is this an approval?
Yeah, motion to approve.
Okay, it doesn't usually it says. Motion to approve. Sam, second. RP, all those in favor? And then the first reading that we already covered.
Yep.
Those, okay.
Yep.
The National Grid Agreement. Did you want to talk the same?
So, part of the capital improvement project at Red Mill Elementary School has involved the need to upgrade the transformer to handle the capacity of some of the new HVAC equipment that we were putting in front of the building. We had started a collaboration with National Grid in the beginning of January, and National Grid had worked to try to find the most cost-effective measure for us to be able to have the capacity within the building. Why it was required for us to handle this year is because the new boilers are going in, and those new boilers have all sorts of new circulation pumps. We got a little behind with National Grid. National Grid didn't give us all the information. Long story short, Assemblyman McDonald helped to push this along. They are now ready to start the work on the 24th. And I have signed the agreement conditionally with the board approving this tonight for us to be able to make a lump sum payment for our portion of the conversion to the new transformer. And making that lump sum payment, we have found out from the state education department that that will be aidable through our capital improvement project. So we will get a large portion of that money back. There's also in the resolution tonight, you can see the opinion letter from our architect that this is the best course of action. This will kind of put us under a little bit of a time crunch. The shutdown period we learned today will happen before school starts. So I actually asked in our construction meeting today for them to tell the principal there will be a period of time leading right up to the first day of school where staff will not be able to access the building because there'll be no power in the building. But all of that will be done before school begins and the new transformer will be up and running.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Motion to approve. Robert, second. RP, all those in favor? And then the elevator maintenance bid for 26-27.
So we had a longstanding agreement with McGee Elevator. Otis Elevator had really been seeking to try to reclaim the district's business. As you can see in the backup letter that's there, there's a huge delta between McGee and Otis, which is typically a red flag that they've missed something in the bid. So Mr. Bickle had a long conversation with Otis Elevator. Their ambition to get back into the district is really the reason that they're willing to submit a bid that's low. They're still going to meet all of our bid specs. We actually spoke about out years as well. They're working to get their contract on state contract, which would mean moving forward, we wouldn't see this massive increase just because they got their foot in the door. We would see nominal increases moving forward. So that's the reason that we're recommending that we go to Otis Elevator for the elevator maintenance going into the new year.
There's not a lot of elevator maintenance companies, are there? Right.
The pool is shrinking. Yeah.
Are there a lot of elevators in our district?
There are, believe it or
There are.
not.
There's a fair number.
I think we counted, there is 16 throughout the district.
Well,
Goff has at least two.
Goff
Three.
has 2. I think the high school is 4. Yeah, we went through and counted them. There are quite a few.
Okay, any comments or questions on this one? Okay, motion to approve. Cindy, second. Rob, all those in favor? Okay, no tabled motions, no old business. For the consent agenda, any comments or questions on that? Okay, motion to approve. Kathy, second. RP, all those in favor? Congratulations.
Congratulations, ladies.
No new business. Second public forum. Okay, board, starting over with Kathy.
I said thanks.
A warm welcome to our new faculty. Glad to have you on board.
I was gonna say 2 things. One, we talked earlier about the digest that Mark puts out about everything that's going on. I will say, I can't say that I paid much attention to those in the last few years, but now I'm looking at them, and compared to what they used to be, it is incredible the amount of information that's provided in there about, not just school stuff, but community things, things that, parents, kids, it's really an impressive regular feature. And the other thing I will say regarding the athletic code of conduct academic policy, for years, and by that I mean decades, a lot of schools in the suburban council, including Columbia, and as far back as 1988, when I had to sign a blue card, there was no academic policy. And when you would play schools from the Big Ten, Albany, Schenectady, CBA, Troy, they had an academic policy, right? And it was 75, 65, right? But student athletes that you played the first time around weren't playing the second time around. And it's not meant to be punitive, but I think it's good that we are doing this because we haven't had one for, as far as I can figure out, at least 40 years. And I'm sure it's longer than that. And I think this is a really good step. And it is good to have accountability, but also, trying to make sure that the students have a chance to participate, because that percentage is like 98% of you don't go on and play college athletics. You need to be, sports is something to, just like, any kind of program where you're participating in school, the school play, or, an extracurricular art class, like all of that stuff is helping you become hopefully a productive an adult. Sports is the same thing, and you're probably not making a career out of it. So I think this is really good to keep that perspective on the students so that they understand, it is very, very, very small that you're going to turn this into something for a scholarship, for a NIL deal, for any of that. So I'm really glad that this is happening. So.
Awesome.
Awesome.
I'm sorry, I hate to bring this up at the very end, and I didn't see another spot. I'm just wondering if there's any update on enrollment numbers and or if there's a horizon on when the final enrollment numbers are going to be looked at.
We don't have anything yet because we thought we were somewhat stable, and boy, we got slammed this week.
Oh, yeah.
So
Speaking last
it's moving dramatically. We'll have it. I would say give us about another 2 weeks for the second meeting. And I can send something out, the executive memo to the board, just so you have a glance at what it looks like.
Thanks.
Okay, and tonight we do need to have an executive session for matters related to a particular individual. So motion to move into executive. Robert and RP, all those in favor? And we will not be returning.
Great.